republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies first, Judy.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the first Board of Education meeting for 2012, and we will get started momentarily. Brad, is there a modification?
There's one modification. I'd like to add a supplemental personnel report to the consent agenda. So that's going to be Roman 3, letter C.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay. Very good. Noted. Then we'll move on. I'm looking at a red wall. Somebody gets a red wall in our boardroom. It's really red.
It's red.
I think Dr. Brown had paint left over from his office, apparently. But it's
not finished. We have student work that's going to be displayed.
It's not subtle either.
The red is just the canvas. The student work is what I want you to pay most attention to, what is coming.
We are the little red, Dr. Brown.
We're big red now.
Yeah, and some of us, I'm not quite sure that's the shade, but it's close enough. Close enough. That's good. So since I bleed red, I'm all for it. Public and staff, there is one person signed up, Pat. Pat?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. My name is Pat Eric. And as some of you know, many people work behind the scenes to monitor New Roots Charter School. Mainly I'm here to remind us that New Roots enrolls 71 students from Ithaca City School District, and the loss of revenue to ICSD is over $1 million for the 2011-12 budget. And if we combine this with 2 preceding years that New Roots has been in operation, we're talking about a total of $2.5 million. Along with tuition from ICSD, New Roots draws tuition from 17 other school districts from as far away as Binghamton and Auburn. Their operating budget this year, based on 168 students, is $2.5 million, and they are solvent. They run in the black every year and have no significant fiscal issues. We have a CPA review all their financials yearly to confirm their own claim that they are solvent, and in fact our conclusion is that they will not be closing due to fiscal insolvency. However, they have significant problems in the areas of attendance, special education, staff turnover, and academic performance. They will be seeking a renewal of their charter, and that process is already underway. I would like the officials of this district and all the districts who have students at New Roots to be aware of the basis on which they will seek renewal and the process that should involve the wider community. This should not happen as it did when the original charter was authorized, with too many of the stakeholders completely uninformed. We need to educate ourselves now and decide as a community on a course of action. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Anyone else wishing to speak at this point? Susan, you're good?
For now.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, Susan.
Can I ask you a question?
So, Eldred, do you want to speak?
Question for Susan. You guys have been monitoring New Roots closer than anyone other than New Roots officials over the last few years. Some of your insights have been valuable. I wonder what you and your compatriots would think about coming up with some suggestions about what you see as a possible beneficial use of New Roots. There are communities that use their charter schools to learn and to experiment and to try different things with different groups of kids who, for a variety of reasons, don't respond well to the traditional box education that is provided by their public counterpoints. So I'm asking if you think you could come up with some suggestions about what we might actually think to do with New Roots as part of that public conversation.
Is that a question to Pat?
Pat?
Or Susan?
Oh, I'm sorry, Pat, yes.
Okay.
Just
thanks.
checking.
Yeah, I was just,
Yes, we will not ask you that question.
I have answers, but.
And treated as rhetorical, I'm not asking for a response now. It's just it's
Well, would you like me to say that we will be bringing you every meeting from now until June at least? We will be bringing you information. And based on that information, I think the community should start to discuss this. Because I don't think there's an awful lot of discussion about this school.
Well, I'm asking you to make a subtle change, if it's possible, to not focus just on information, but to actually come up with suggestions. To be a useful part of framing the conversation that you think the community should have about meetings.
Well, I wouldn't suppose to do that until everyone had a lot of information. And so I think information is going to get disseminated before I make any suggestions or other people that are monitoring make any suggestions.
and
There was an enrollment number in the original charter.
Yes.
Has it been met?
It has not. It hasn't been met for 3 years, with the exception of about 2 weeks.
What's the enrollment number now for 9th through 12th?
Right now, they enroll 168 students as of their December invoicing.
Okay. What should they have?
They should have 175,
Okay.
or 80% of the 225 required of their charter.
Yeah. Okay.
And they are continuously under-enrolled.
Yeah. Okay.
any other board responses on this subject? We'll go on to student reps and Aviv.
Sure. Well, we'll start with Noah, actually.
Very good.
Last week, a group of students in one of our community committees, student-run committees, called Students for Social Responsibility, spent 24 hours in wheelchairs as part of a sort of role play to demonstrate the struggles that face students with disabilities within our community and within our school. The experiment has prompted some discussion all around our school, and they plan on continuing this role play several times throughout the year.
All right, and as many of you may know, our first semester is coming to a close, and we're trying to tie everything together in our classic ACS form with project-based assessments and exhibitory examples of what we have learned and what's happened at LACS since the beginning of the school year, and we are also looking forward to a new semester filled with learning and excitement.
LACS has been selected as one of 50 schools around the globe to be a secondary pilot for a program known as the Big History Project. This program focuses on hands-on curriculum for 9th graders in the subjects of earth science and global studies. We are excited and honored to be selected for this pilot program founded by education entrepreneurs Bill Gates and David Christian.
As we speak, there is our semi-annual school concert going on at LACS. That's why I think this room isn't packed right now, because everyone's up there.
Oh, it had to be something.
We show our support to all of our fellow colleagues and students up there right now.
We now have silverware back in our lunch. Instead of using plastic, we have real silverware, and this has been an ongoing effort to phase back in a more sustainable lunch program at our school.
And this Friday is the annual Dr. Dave Day, in which we as a school will celebrate our founder and former principal, Dr. Dave Lehman. He and his wife, longtime LACS administrator Judy Lehman, will be flying in from Wisconsin for the day of ceremonies, which we will rededicate all of our mission statements and put them back on the gymnasium walls. They used to be on the old gymnasium, and we took them down, and it's taken us this long to get them back up there, but we're very excited to put them back up and remind our school what we're all about.
Our principal at LACS, Joe Greenberg, will be presenting at the New York State Performance-Based Consortium in New York City this February. He will be giving a presentation about interactive transcripts.
This Friday, a group of students, including myself, will be presenting about anti-bullying efforts at LACS at a conference on bullying at TST BOCES. LACS is fortunate enough to be a leader in the anti-bullying movement, thanks to the effort of our school therapist, Celia Clement, and a large amount of students who support the anti-bullying work that we do.
Last thing, LACS students in the community service class, which I am one of them, worked with residents at the Finger Lakes Residential Center in Lansing to create some poetry and artwork to submit to the MLK poetry and art competition. The awards will be presented at the MLK breakfast on Saturday at GIAC. That would be a cool event, so it'd be great to see some of you guys there.
That's all we have.
Very good. Thank you, Aviv and Noah. Tony? Ithaca High School.
With the first semester coming to a close, many ISS students are getting ready for midterms. And also on Friday, January 27th, we will be having our annual Staff Appreciation Day, and we invite everyone to come and have a bagel.
Have a bagel. Any responses to students? Other than going old school on food service at LACS. Back in the day, well, actually, my wife told me I shouldn't use that term anymore. But guys used to bend the forks, and I always hated going, and the fork would be bent, and you couldn't use it, or you'd have to bend it back, and metal fatigue. Anyway, but it's just something we had to deal with. We had real trays and all that stuff, right?
You did say metal fatigue, not mental fatigue.
No, so this was a long time ago. So it's interesting that we're going back, and but we did. Districts did go away from dishwashers and trays because of the labor and a lot of energy to washing, and so we've come full circle, and now that's a green way to do it.
It's kind of like a second coming back. So we had plates and forks at ACS until about a couple years ago, and we're slowly trying to become a little bit more sustainable and gain some of our sustainability back.
Greenness back.
Greenness back, yeah.
It's that new building that went on up there. I think that you have to have an offset of being greener, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not giving them a hard time. It's great. I appreciate it. Anything else? We're going to move on, Dr. Brown, if we're all done with bendable forks.
I think the fact that you can bend one scares me.
Yeah, that was never an issue. I don't think that's never an issue. Consent agenda, if someone could help us out here.
I move the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Pat. Any questions? Any comments regarding the consent? Thank you, Brad.
Just one. I know you don't all study the backup to the consideration of accounts, but if you turn to that 35 pages and you look at page 22, 3, and 4, you'll notice as we turn back the tax warrant for collection, the biggest tax delinquent is the state of New York. That paragon of efficiency, Andrew Cuomo, who is sure that all of us in the schools can't possibly do anything well, has managed to basically make us, and now the county, will be turning it over to the county, his banker, to take care of his issues. So I just wanted to point that out to you.
You should become a lobbyist for students.
You think? Yeah, I hear they already have one.
Graduated from your school.
Can you want to clarify that, Brad? The tax warrants, et cetera, for those who are...
Uncollected taxes get turned back for collection from the county, and unfortunately our friends in Tompkins County, fortunately for us, the school district, they have to front the money for us, and that just turns them into the banker for the state of New York in this case. There's over 2 pages of listings, single-spaced, of the ones that they haven't paid.
I did notice that, Brad, and I was incensed, as you are.
Yeah, so...
When does the...
But I'm not a paragon of efficiency, the governor is. He's the one who is certain everyone else is inefficient, and he can't possibly take care of their accounts.
When does the penalty rate come?
That already kicked in when.
It did?
Yeah, they've been charged the penalty already, haven't they, Margaret?
Yes.
It would have been November 30th and...
It would have started the 1st of...
The 1st of November.
Right, the 1st of November.
1st of November and 1st of December. 1st of November, 1st of December, you can pay with penalty. And then now we're into January and it gets turned back to the county for collection. Just thought I'd point that out.
I appreciate that, Brad. And for those who are wondering what Brad's referring to, Governor Cuomo has been very public in his criticism of school district management, which really falls on school boards and their management of finances, operations, etc., and really doesn't understand why we can't provide all the programming that we do and use all our fund balances, our reserves to do so, and why we should not be able to live in an environment of tax levy limits, etc. So we are in that environment, and we will continue to do what we do, Dr. Brown, to provide the services and programming for the students that we need in this district. But we're going to be into the budget process in a more deeper way, in a public way, probably at the end of January, and then going forward. Not to dwell on the governor, but his executive budget does come out, I think, on January 19th or what?
Yes, 17th or 19th.
It's soon. So his budget will be published, and we will have a better idea of the distribution of state aid. And the last few years, that state aid has been reduced fairly dramatically. So we will see. We've been told that state aid will not be cut this year to districts, but that does not mean the final numbers as they come out to the districts are what we may expect. So that's the next meeting, and our voting meeting on the 24th. This is a workshop meeting. We're going to finish up with. Do we do the consent agenda yet? No. But we're going to move on in a minute. But this is a work session rather than a regular voting meeting, and the 24th we'll have information from the superintendent before we get to him in a moment. But we're going to go ahead, and all those in favor of the consent agenda, but not perhaps the governor of New York, that's everyone except everyone with Eldred. That's everyone. So, Dr. Brown, feel free to add on, but I think you have other things to talk about.
Yeah, I'll start something new. In this role, Happy New Year, and I have 3 quick announcements. January 23rd will be our next PLC, Professional Learning Community Day. We will start the day at 8:30 a.m. in Culp Auditorium, and I will be speaking to the entire staff, making some connections between the work that we've done over the last year. And you're all invited, and I hope to see you there. We'll spend the day together. I'm hoping over the next 2 days to put out information to staff about, particular information to staff about what will happen on that day, but right now I can tell you that we'll be together for the day on the 23rd, and you're invited to be there for all of that. On the 24th, we'll have our next opportunity to recognize students and staff for excellence. The commendation ceremony will be held at 5:30 p.m., correct? Connie, 5:30 in Culp Auditorium. So 2 events that I'm hoping you can find some time to attend on top of every other meeting that I ask you to attend. And then finally, I have a grant. We've been awarded a grant that I'd like to announce. Under the leadership of Mr. Jim Ellis, who's been outstanding, he and his staff, they've been working with our friends at BOCES, and I'm going to read this to make sure I get it all right, Mark. We've been awarded a grant by NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, in the amount of $99,634 to retrofit 31 school buses with New York State Department of Transportation qualified diesel-fired coolant heaters. So after reading all that and synthesizing, I think we can now start our buses and heat them in the morning with this special device, some kind of device that we're going to use.
It's to help reduce the amount of idling time.
The amount of idling time in the morning.
For cleaner air. It's part of the Clean Air Act.
And we're going to do that with 31 of our school buses, so in the amount of $99,000. So a great grant that we just learned yesterday that we were awarded. Did I get all that, Margaret?
You did well.
All right, I had to read it. Got it all. Those are my 3 quick.
That's fantastic. So now, Margaret, after they're all installed,
yes,
I'll be knocking on your door so we can partner with local restaurants and take their dirty cooking oil to run our buses.
That may require another grant, but you're onto something.
Now we have a couple of classes that are doing some of that work. I actually drove the go-kart last year doing the Ithaca parade, the Ithaca Festival parade. We have some work to do, I guess, to make that work on a bus. But yeah, we have kids who probably can figure out how to make that work on a bus for us. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Those are the three announcements.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Brown. On to school district business and on to one of our favorite topics is the district policies, and there's an approval process apparently that's this will be an adjustment of an approval process. We have an approval process for policies, but
I hear theme music in the background. Can you turn that on for me real quick, Dr. Brown? I told Seth there's only 14 slides, so just bear with me. This will be quick. As folks probably know, we've contracted through New York State School Board Association to do a complete policy review of the ICSD policy book. Our policy book has been somewhat dated. And by dated I mean that we have policies in the books from the 1970s. We have some things that we are doing that aren't on policy, and some policies that are on books that we aren't doing. And so we contracted through NISBA to go through and try to provide for us a thorough, complete policy review. In middle of December, we received back from NISBA 4 sections of our policy review book. The zeros, every school district in New York State, every public school district in New York State, their policy books are indexed by zeros, 1,000 series, 2,000 series, 3,000, all the way to the 9,000 series. So far, we've received back from these good folks the zeros, the 1,000, the 2,000, and 3,000 series. The policy committee met on last Thursday to try to begin to digest this piece of information and how best to proceed for the board. To give you an example, so the 0 series, which you see up here, has approximately, if I'm not mistaken, 44 pages of text that need to be reviewed, edited, discussed, debated, worked with various superintendents, and then before it comes up to the board for a full review. And so we're trying to find the best way to do it. The way in which the policy review is going to work is like this. Currently, in our 0 series, we have a single policy, which is policy 0350. Which requires the superintendent every year to give the Board of Education a State of the District address. That's been on our policies for a couple of years now, and that's the expectation. So what NISBA did was go through that series and say, we're looking at your 0 series, we're looking at things that are legal mandates, things that are highly recommended from New York State and or the federal government, and things that they would recommend as just general good practice from the New York School Board Association. And they sent us back what they think would be the appropriate documents to put in the 0 series. So what you see here for board members is, for example, this is the current, what we have currently. Though NISBA recommended that we don't look at our current and we only look at what they sent us, it doesn't work well for me at all. And I'm sure you can imagine, Ithaca has a great deal of local policies, some that seem odd and some that we probably want to keep giving the specificity of what we're trying to accomplish here. So that's what's currently on our policies. This is what NISBA is recommending us to do. And so as you can see, and anything that's bold is an actual policy they sent us. My apologies to show up all that well. If it's not bold, it's something they suggest, but we don't have to do, and they didn't send us the policy. All to say, for example, we've gone from one policy, now on this side with the recommendings, we now have 11 different policies in the 0 series. So we go something from mission statement and vision, which does not currently exist, but we have to create that, to 0100, to 0100 regulation R, to 110, 110 R, 115, 115 R, etc. And so we're trying to find ways in which we can do this in a systemic manner of how to go through each one of these policies, since we know how much the board gets so excited and wide-eyed when policy discussions come up, right? So partly what we decided is we try to break things down like this. In terms of being systemic, we're going to go series by series and try to keep the board and the public abreast of what's taking place as much as possible. A good portion of these policies will be sent to various committees to help form, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for parents, for students, and for caregivers to have some inputs. And this is a draft / suggestion / sample of what may be done. So, for example, one of the things we have to do is, according to this book, is to create a mission statement and vision. since our goal is not to add additional work for people, and since Dr. Brown is soon enough going to be engaging in a process, tell me the process name again, Dr.
Building on successes.
So despite what you see here, a building on successes process, which includes stakeholders, community groups, feedback, information, etc., that we say to Dr. Brown, I'll work with you in that group or whomever, and one of the outcomes of that group will be the creation of a mission statement and vision that will then come to the board for a full vote, say June of 2012. We know that we have to do equal opportunity and non-discrimination. According to NYSBA, they don't agree with having separate policies for faculty and staff. So they want the district to have a single policy, so they put it up front. And so this policy is 40-something pages long, but we'll be working with Dr. Myers, we'll be working with Mr. Van Kuren to figure out what should be the actual language, because some of this language is going to be taken from things like our student code of conduct. Some of it's going to be taken from the new DASA Act that we have to have in place by June 1st, right, if I'm not mistaken? July 1st. So there's ways in which our goal is to not make things difficult, but just to be keeping track of these and working with various already pre-existing committees to make this work seamless and to make the work thorough and to be the most efficient and beneficial for our district. And so you're going to be seeing these as boards. There's always going to be one policy member assigned to it, along with some district leader or district leaders. It may be, for example, the policy on HIV and AIDS. I imagine Judy Hoffman would be pretty much involved in that, right? So there's ways in which that's going to take place. For policies that they're recommending, there's going to be some need for a board discussion. For example, does the board believe 0200 that we need school district goals and objectives? Because currently we don't have that policy. They didn't send us a copy of it, but it's something we want to do as a board or as a district, then we engage in that process. And they're recommending that we actually delete policy 3050, which is the evaluation of instructional programs. And so that's going to require some sort of board conversation as well. So as the point of bringing this to the full board is say, the policy committee, when and where appropriate, will do the appropriate legwork to make sure any policy that we're legally mandated to have or strongly encouraged to have will be well vetted by various district personnel, students, parents, caregivers, etc., including the committee before it comes to the board. But there will be other policies that the board is going to have some sort of conversation about to give the committee some sort of direction how best to proceed. And we will stay with the original process of 2 readings. In other words, a reading first for public comment to put it out to the community. The second reading will be a vote. And we'll have to do this for each policy. Though our expectation or hope is when and where possible is to do it by series. So if we can do a complete series for you all, that's what we'll do to minimize. So for example, I think in the 2,000 or 3,000 series, there's 2 policies. We could probably do those together, right? In other series, there's 100 policies. So it's going to be a long, arduous task. Our expectation as a committee is that we're meeting, I think, every 3 weeks we decided, or we're going to try to do something like that. From now until the end of June or end of whenever people's terms are up, at the very least, and see what happens from there. And we'll try to, I'm a little hesitant about letting the suggested policies out into the public discourse because the board has had no say on these. They're just language from NYSBA, and I don't want people to get confused that the board's going to adopt something that it hasn't even had a conversation about yet. So as the board goes through and reviews and tailors these policies to our district and our needs, that's how we're going to proceed. And so at the end of this process, we'll have an updated, completely up-to-date policy book that will also be digitized and able to be searchable online. And so NYSBA will host it for us, and we can actually just type in, I want to look for this, as opposed to having to know the exact number, the sub-index, which gets a little arduous and time-consuming for folks. So all in all, it's a phenomenal process, but it's going to take us a while to get there. Questions, comments, concerns?
Go ahead, Seth.
You can join the committee again.
Okay. What I've noticed occasionally is that we'll have a policy on the books, and then we have kind of an on-the-ground practice that may not match that policy, and then someone may say, "Oh, by the way, I just found this," and it. I guess my question is, we're investing a lot of board time and district time in this process. How do we assure that all the brain power, that we're going to try and bring to this is actually used by, the employees and staff who have to try and implement these things, and that it doesn't become the dusty digital model there, and that it's actually useful, and maybe just having it more searchable means it'll have more compliance and things like that. But that's a concern I have, in that if we're going to invest this amount of time and effort, how do we make it useful for people to actually use and benefit from?
that's always the concern, and particularly in my field of program evaluation and policy analysis, the concern is always how do you take something from paper into practice, and how do you make sure those match. I think one of the things that's going to be beneficial to this district is, first and foremost, we have to do this for legally, we should have our policy book updated. So it's not useless energy no matter what takes place from it. We just need to be in sync. More importantly, I think what we find out in these situations is the process is essentially important. And so through the process, through the conversations that the process elicits, helps us to ensure that what's on paper gets into practice. And so there's a number of ways. We actually have policies. For example, last year we passed a no smoking policy, which means that we should have no smoking signs at every entrance and every exit. Right? So there's ways in which we're passing policies that we may not actually even be being able to deliver on. So we have that side as well. So it's not just passing policies that make them the practice, that we may be doing things and vice versa. It means being extremely diligent and having some of those conversations. And I think it gives us an opportunity, if we do this well, to engage in those very questions about, well, the policy says this, but the on-the-ground practice is this, and it's actually better. So then maybe it's time for us to change the policy. Right? Or maybe it's time for us to bring these into link. I think the purpose of doing this is to make sure that we are in sync with what we put on paper and what we do in classrooms. That's the goal of making it happen, and trying to help as best we can facilitate those conversation discussions, and us to learn as a board where the highfalutin theorizing ideas may not actually work well in classrooms for young folks, and vice versa, right? The ways in which sort of NISBA is recommending something to us that we may not be doing that we probably should be paying attention to, and make it that way. But that's going to be the ultimate goal, is how do we make sure that synergy takes place.
As much as, I laugh about this being about as enjoyable as root canal, Dr. Brown has pointed out that some of the policies are going to truly determine our success, right, with students, because they're so out of whack with those goals. And you just said you want to go by series. Would it be possible or useful to maybe get to the key instructional policy, even if they go out of series, so we can handle those and deal with all of those things?
That's possible. A suggestion I think I can think about it. For me, it's going to probably depend on what NISBA sends to us, and so my mind is the curriculum series. I want to say is not 5,000 student services, 4,000. Thank you. So that actually will be the next go round, which comes up in February. So that'll be coming us pretty soon. But I also want to recommend when the Aspen Commission was contracted through New York State, not through New York State, through the federal government, U.S. government Department of Education, to evaluate No Child Left Behind. At one point in time, they put out 75 various recommendations of how to make No Child Left Behind better. And the point of them saying that is that you have to look at this as a total and not as individual pieces. And so as much as we want to do that curriculum piece first, I think we have to consider this policy book in its totality as well, while still making sure that we don't lose sight of some of the more pressing issues, which include not just curriculum, which include things like HR and personnel issues that need to be addressed pretty immediately as well. So we're going to find ways, I think, to forefront these. Some of these are going to be no-brainer conversations, right? Should we have a policy on, I can't give you an example. Others of these are going to be, as we've done previously in this board, and not this board, just this community, much more extensive conversations and dialogues and discussions. It's almost the equivalent of a curriculum audit or a district curriculum review, where it's going to mean that we're going to be evaluating almost everything that we do, because some of the policies are pretty extensive, what they mandate us to do, trainings. Brad's on an excellent thing this morning, I'm sure all board got about unfunded mandates, right? A number of our policies include mandates that we must do, that we don't know that we should do or haven't done, including things that central administration and or teachers should be doing on a yearly basis, but since there's been no one collecting that data, we have no clue even what those expectations are. And so, to answer your question, Mr. Harris, that will be in February, and I'll just make sure that we try to front load that as soon as possible.
In the Zero series, I saw one deletion and many additions.
Yes.
Is that going to be typical as we go through the series?
I think as Pat has done a good job of reading all of them so far, or at least previewing them. Yeah, I'm not calling you out, Judy, at all. Yes, this is a fairly extensive editing process. A good portion of our policies in the books have been local policies. that are neither state or federal mandates or requirements, and I think NISBA is going to recommend that we axe a significant portion of those, and that a good number of our policies that they recommend that we have, we've never even seen or thought about putting on our books. So it's fairly extensive everywhere, every single term. Please.
But just to add to that, a number of the policies, they're suggesting they're not entirely new policies. They might be policies that we have numbered in a different section, or that they're quote condensing a policy that's been cobbled from, we have policies in disparate sections. I think it'll be a lot more sensible.
All for that.
When we're finished.
When we're finished.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's bringing us into alignment with what's much more common across the state, which much more logical, at least to my eyes, when I look at policies. But it is going to be a long, arduous task, and we'll try to make it as easy, efficient, and seamless as possible.
And just the one question regarding the passage of these policies. Is there anything in state law that says you can bundle, or do we? Typically, it is policy by policy, and sure. I mean that's been the practice in the past. So we just want to make sure that when we do eventually do pass these policies, that we are doing it in the manner that is prescribed and is our obligation.
I had a conversation this morning with Linda Bax, who we're working with at NISBA, and asked her that question explicitly. And she said her response was, as we probably some of us know, is that most of the ways in which you handle policies is by district, and there's no state requirements or mandates. NISBA does recommend, the recommended standard operating procedure is a 2-reading procedure, which we've done. I asked, could we bundle policies? And they said, well, absolutely, as long as they were all listed as part of the public agenda and went out. And so the public can see what we're voting on. But we don't have that discussion on every single policy if we're all in agreement with the language currently states, which would be a miracle for this group, but we'll figure out what happens.
So if we have a policy, we can do whatever we want with our policies. Go ahead.
And if I can just add that, Rob, even though they're recommending the deletion, this is our policy book. So Ithaca may say, no, we want that policy. And then we'll send back to NISBA saying, please include this policy with our official finalized book. This is the rationale for it. So in other words, whatever they're sending us as the recommendation, we have the ultimate say in what we want our policy book to look like.
This morning at PTA Council, Corinne and I got into a little discussion on policy and the need for one, or I felt, and so forth. I think what we have to realize is we need a policy because we have to be accountable to that policy. We can also have lawsuits if we're not. And I think, we're coming to that time in history where there are more and more lawsuits. So I think we have to be very, very careful with this. I know I joke, I know you joke, but it's serious. You don't joke, no, I do. And it's a very serious thing.
Well, I was saying something earlier to my 2 good friends here who laugh at me and my policy work, that this is my life. So it's funny that for other people, this is not what they're looking for. I think when policy is done well, it has the potential to be revolutionary and transformative. When policy is done bad, it does nothing more than hurt any sort of institution or organization. And so we have not done policy the best. I'm not saying we've done policy bad, we have not done it the best. I think we have a chance here to do policy much better than we've done in the past, and get it much more aligned with what we want our district to look like and what our practice in the ground look like. And so we have a real opportunity here to be able to engage in some dialogues, to be able to transform some practices and procedures, and to look at ourselves a little bit more reflectively and critically about what we're actually doing in classrooms. So it is a real opportunity here for us to do some good work.
And just refresh me timeline again.
Well, you notice
ongoing process.
Ongoing process, and I think I changed it one more time. I think I was, rather than putting myself, I was putting the chair of the policy committee, whoever that may be, come August. This procedure will be, it's probably going to take us a year between now and completion. So we'll probably have an updated policy book that's fully digitized, I would say by next November, next December. And probably working straight through, because we won't get the last series of policies until May or June. It's a bad time of year to be doing work as a board, so we'll see what takes place. We're probably talking about a year-long process, and we'll try to do it in chunks so it doesn't take up too much of our time needlessly, and we'll focus our time and energy and attention on the policies that require our time, energy, and attention.
Other questions for Sean or the group? Thanks. Go ahead, Chuck.
Done. All these policies are in Dropbox for any board members. So they're under the committees and in the policy committee. So if you want to see what NISBA sent to us, you can find all that in Dropbox. This document right here, I'll be working with Dr. Brown and the central administration team to identify various folks how we can actually make this happen. And I'll put this in Dropbox as well. So if any board members have questions about updates, we should let it know. And once and soon enough, vis-a-vis the superintendent's blog, we'll be using the policy committee to make sure we keep folks updated that way. So if you're looking at the ICSD Insider, you'll be able to find some of this data and information on that page as well.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks to the policy committee for taking on a big project, and thank you, NISBA, for offering the services. So
they're getting paid well,
and getting paid well to do those services. So we're appreciative of that. And item number 2 is mid-year review process. And Dr. Brown, do you want to speak to this?
I will, and I'll invite some friends to the table if you want to go ahead and do that now before we start. He's working with right here. There we go. We're going to have.
I did. Yeah.
Well, and you have this document in your Dropbox, but I thought I would share a hard copy as well. In support of our priority number 5, and using data to incorporate into our decision-making processes, we're doing what we call a mid-year review process with all schools and departments. In time, I see that moving to being a more of a quarterly review process. Some overachievers have already done it quarterly. But right now, we started off with we're calling a mid-year review process. What that looks like is myself and other instructional leaders at the central level going out to schools and departments and having a conversation. I'm going to talk about what that conversation looks like and what we see happening during those times. First, we've also invited Ms. Gomber and her friends tonight to talk about a bit of a mid-year review process that she and her school has already went through this year through the CINE review process. So she's going to talk about what they've done at BJM, which is very similar to what we're going to do at all schools in the coming months. But again, we're calling it a mid-year review process, but in time I hope that it may be more of a quarterly review process. But I've passed around a sheet that has a series of questions. I have no slideshow or no fancy PowerPoint, purposely. This is a learning conversation that we're going to be having with school leaders and leadership teams. We aren't looking for fancy PowerPoints or Excel spreadsheets. We want to have qualitative and quantitative conversations at roundtables like this. The 3 questions that are going to guide the discussion are in front of you. What is it? The first one, what is it that you want students to know? That can be everything from what we're doing right now with implementing the Common Core to other curricular development work that's happening in individual schools. I anticipate that being a great conversation for individual grade level and department level teams and schools overall. But what is it that you want students to know and be able to do is going to be the question that we start with when we go out to meet with folks. Secondly, how will you know if they've learned it? You've heard me and others talk much about formative and summative assessments. Our grade level teams and departments and schools are having the same conversation about how will they know if students have learned what they've intended for them to know. That's going to lead into some data, qualitative and quantitative conversations about assessments and what they look like and what we're going after. And then finally, what will you do for students who've learned it or who need additional support? That's going to get at our intervention work. Oftentimes when doing mid-year review processes like this or quarterly review processes like this, it quickly gets into remediation. And most times it starts at remediation. This is bigger. What we're going after as far as excellence speaks to intervention. For students who have already mastered the Common Core or the standards that we put in front of them and those who are struggling with it, we're going to talk about intervention. So I see that third question leading us down that path. And then there'll be an opportunity to get at some additional questions on things like APPR, the implementation of APPR, our classroom walkthrough process, in time the Dignity of All Students Act, things that are district-wide and statewide initiatives. We're hoping to have conversations with school leadership teams about how that's working in their buildings also. But we're going to be setting up those times with schools and departments over the next couple of weeks, and in February, March, we'll be going out and sitting down with teams to talk and going through this process like that, and having a learning conversation, not a judging conversation, but a learning conversation using qualitative and quantitative data points. And before we shift to Denise and some things that they've done already, which is in line with much of this, questions about this process?
You say it won't be a judging process, it'll be a learning process?
Yeah.
Can you tell me why you're saying, like, what do you mean when you say that?
Most of the data we're going to be looking at is going to be formative data. That formative data we're going to be using to make real-time and dynamic shifts in instructional practices. That is learning versus judging. The data that we oftentimes use is Regents or ELA exam scores. Most of that data we're just getting. We could have a judgment conversation now about that. I don't think that would help us move the work forward versus something that I know our staffs are doing right now. That's just one example, but again, having a conversation about what we can do to improve the outcomes using these questions is learning more so than me judging. It can be intimidating for the superintendent and the leadership team to come out and sit down with they're going to think it's judging, and that can shift the conversation versus me saying it's going to be us learning together.
I asked that question, Dr. Brooks. I said, you've heard me say it to you before, that one of the things that I find somewhat problematic is that the board oftentimes is positioned as a judging body as opposed to a body that's trying to engage in the work collectively and collaboratively with folks. And so that's why I wanted to hear that shift real quick. So I'm looking forward to what comes next. Thank you.
And if I could add, it's not them learning from me, it's me learning from them as well.
Yes.
Because I learn something every day from talking to educators in this district. And so taking that and then taking it to other meetings that I'm going to be having throughout the district, I'm hoping we can cross-pollinate some of the best practices that our schools are implementing.
It seems like just looking at these questions before I hear from Denise on this seems to follow our trend in making our building leaders, meaning principals and high-level administrators, instructional leaders, as opposed to just administrators processing, the daily tasks or numbers or reports, things they have to generate. But in doing that, have we taken things off their plate? Have we offered support in different ways to allow them that space to grow as instructional leaders of their building? And are we doing it both things? Or I know we're moving that way, but
I won't answer this question, but I will say I know they want to answer it for me. But I will say that's why we have what we've been calling HR concepts of key levers. We've focused the work. We're talking about our teaching and learning framework, POCs, and our human capital efforts. You barely hear me talk about other things. Although we're hit with something, or people approach us every day with doing something outside of those three HR concepts. That's what these questions are based on, that focus. There have been some things that we've stopped doing, but I will let Denise and others speak to some things I've attempted to take off their place or shield them from. But there are many. We are attempting to be much more focused. And I like you referring to them as instructional leaders, because that's what we have a community of. Everyone must be an instructional leader. Whether you're working with young people every day, leading a group of staff, young people every day, or the bus driver who welcomes a young person first thing in the morning, they're all instructional leaders. Yeah. So it's making sense to you? All right. And I may make you a bit nervous. I'm going to invite you to come along with us at times for some of these conversations. And as we go through the process, as we get more comfortable with it. But Denise, would you like to share what you've been doing at BJ Young? And we were going to have Mr. Knight come tonight as well from DeWitt.
That's what I heard.
He has had an unfortunate accident, so he won't be joining us tonight, but he will be at the next meeting. So tonight is just our friends from BJ Young.
Cool. Thank you. Seth, I can just make a comment too, in addition to what Dr. Brown said. With the focus of the hedgehog concepts, there's still all the other things to do, the managerial and the behavioral and the systems piece, but it's just a different way of leading. So instead of leading with those concepts, we're leading with what are the most important things happening in the teaching and learning. So as we get better at it, it starts to all integrate. It feels less like more of things or additional things. And I'm experiencing it already, and I think it's just a healthy shift. And we can talk about that in more detail. So, first, Marianne Campbell is the assistant now at BJM, and some of it's through the city work, and she's been a tremendous helper with all the work that started as the clock started ticking for the city process. And Lynn Vanderwerf, if you all know Lynn, and she was on one of our leadership teams we have a number of other members who are on the teams, so you'll be hearing from them when we come back to actually go through the plan. Because what I'm going to do tonight is give you an update on the process and the status, some of the highlights from the review, and then I thought it was important to highlight a few lessons learned because this is our second time through the process. So some lessons learned of what helped us from going through the experience, and lessons learned, maybe some things that we didn't keep doing as a district, and to learn from that so that as we go into a new plan, we keep the priorities going. I also want to just start out commending the BGM students and the staff and the families, because it's quite a process and it involves everybody, and all the activity that goes on, and scheduling and interviewing, and nine reviewers in your building for 2 days in a row. It's definitely impacts everybody involved with the community. So I highly commend them. They've done a beautiful job with all of that. In terms of the process and the status of where we're at, we received the notification from State Ed in October 21st. We had PTA forums and did a lot of written communication so that the community knew what the process was and where we were at. Then the leadership team that worked on the development to prepare for the school quality review completes a self-assessment and also a provision of all the evidence in the areas that we are reviewed for. And that's a little bit of what Dr. Brown was talking about. It's really like a template for the whole district is what happens. The areas that we're reviewed in are data collection, analysis, and transfer to teaching and learning. We're reviewed in teaching and learning, school leadership, our infrastructures, our staff development, and our facilities. So it's a very comprehensive review. So with all of that, we have guidelines that we follow, and then the building and the team does a self-assessment. So we create just a lot of binders and boxes of evidence, and within each of those areas, the team and the staff have completed a self-assessment. The reviewers take all of that, the BOCES reviewers, it's the school improvement team that reviewed us. They have that information, some in advance and then some when they come. So on December 5th and 6th, we had our 9 visitors with us for those 2 days, and they had all of our information and all of their information. They also do an assessment, so they rate us on where we're doing. And the assessment really is, is there no evidence? Is there some evidence? Is there significant evidence of the best practices that they want in each of those categories? Is it exemplary? So it's like a 1 to 4 rating scale. So we went through that, and then Ellen O'Donnell, who was leading the team, met with our staff on the 7th. So right the day after the review was completed in terms of the site visit, she met with us and just did a brief kind of preliminary impressions and reactions to the whole staff, which actually was nice. She didn't have to do that, but it felt very affirming after having everybody with you and then everybody just disappearing. So Ellen did a nice job with that. Our staff, we just got the report last week, the final report, and the report is intended to help us develop the comprehensive plan. So we haven't even gone through the final report with the whole staff yet. We're going to be doing that this week. For each grade level, there's a point person from the leadership team, so that person will take the lead with all of the grade levels, and then when we come back together as a staff, we'll go through it. The comprehensive ed plan is due January 21st. So.
Presenting, we're going to be asking for an extension.
Yes, so we'll.
But that needs to be approved by the board.
Yeah, so we'll be asking for an extension, and you know, everyone is just under pretty, you know, urgent timelines. So, because we come back to you with the full plan, and you approve or adjust or don't approve certain areas of the plan. And then we'll do a community report after we're done. Any questions or comments about the process?
So a bit more intense than what I shared with you about what we're going to do with all schools,
Yeah.
but along the same lines.
I was not a fast enough writer to get down what they checked on.
Okay. The areas where they...
Yeah, I got
okay. Data analysis, causes, and then the impact on teaching and learning.
Okay.
Then there's a category of your entire teaching and learning process.
Okay.
School leadership, your infrastructures within the school, your staff development, and your facilities. A couple of some highlights.
Just Denise.
Oh, sorry, sir.
When you come back to us with your plan, what are the questions we need to be asking as we're determining whether to approve it or not? Or I mean, other than saying here's our plan, and you know, as a non-educator, you know, what kind of questions do you want from me as a board member? Others kind of, you know, I don't.
I think you should ask us when the first part is all the data review and some of the causes of what got us off the list, what got us back on, what are we doing, what do we need to keep the teaching and learning. There'll be a whole area on curriculum and teaching and learning, and what do you need to do, and it may not necessarily be, it may not be fiscal, it may be, you know, permission to do business differently, and I can explain some of that as I go through the highlights. What kinds of policies, practices will help us. I think from an equity perspective is how do we look at this school and what does this school need, what does BJM need, given our school profile and what we've said are the priorities, while still keeping the focus on what the district goals are. We may just need to get there a little differently than what Caroline might need or what Northeast might need, or, you know, I think just a shift from standardization to what equity really is, if that makes sense. Is that answering your question?
Mr. Peacock, this template would also be something I would
I was going to say, answering those questions.
If these questions aren't addressed in the plan, then I would question whether or not I would approve that plan. These questions along with what she's mentioned.
And imagine a situation where we have serious issues with the plan. We then refuse to approve it. It goes back to the building and it's revised in some way, or what? That would be
the position we take. Hopefully that won't be the case. We're going to do our due diligence to make sure everything is addressed.
So the other part of the highlights from the review and going into the actual plan is we'll be coming back to you with all of our data. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about that. And it's not just numbers. I really like that it deals with, there's a whole area of causal analysis. So it looks at, you know, what are causes or factors that contribute to high student achievement or low student achievement. And it's not just numbers and it's not just student data. It asks us to look at our entire district. So what's going on in your district? Has there been turnover? Has there been changes in policies and procedures? What are the community aspects? has there been, the last time there was a major redistricting plan going on when we were in city. So it's that part of it is very comprehensive. We'll be looking, one of the things that we were told we recommended to look at is how assessments are going in our district. Assessment will be a big part. Are there too many? What are the purpose? What's the impact? And not just looking at the New York State assessments, but looking at the kinds of assessments that actually are a part of the hedgehog concepts, the formative assessments and the benchmark assessments that are being developed. I think you'll find as I go through this, it's really aligned with what Dr. Brown, when he came to town, just put out there. It really is aligned with what both the state and the reviewers talked about. So our school-wide goals right now are already aligned with what the reviewers had talked about, and they relate to the teaching and learning framework, the professional learning community work, and the human capital aspects. Those are going to be three of the major areas that we're going to be talking about. Lots of focus on comprehension, how we're using our resources, instructional strategies, how are people doing with interventions and actual collaborative teaming. Lynn made a comment because she's your district-wide. If you want to just share, what are your reactions about when you saw the report and the review?
Something I just was really interested in seeing things that I thought really impacted on a district level. I'd focus mostly on K-5 or pre-K-5 literacy, and so a lot of work we're kind of embarking on to really solidify what it is that we want students to know and what is best practice in teaching literacy, and making sure that we are consistent in approach and we have a consistent philosophy to that throughout the district across our 8 elementary schools. And so seeing those recommendations within this report really just supported that work needs to happen, and then talking with Denise and Mary about how we can maybe alleviate some of the pressure on BJM, like if this work is happening through a district committee where there's representation from all 8 schools, how can we make sure that we work together so that BJM can focus their efforts within their building and we're not doing redundant work?
And then could you give a specific example of some of the practices that were in the report that you've attempted to cross-pollinate across the district?
Sure. So there was a lot of recommendations around focusing literacy instruction on comprehension from pre-K through 5. So yes, all aspects of literacy, phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary fluency, those are all important, but to really get at that higher order thinking, we need to put more of a focus on comprehension, and that is something that is best practice. It is research, something that we need to make sure we're focusing on throughout the district. As we're revising and developing performance assessments for ELA to use across the district, it really is focused on that comprehension piece, and then being able to comprehend a wide variety of grade level appropriate complex text to do actual tasks with. And so
something I'm hoping we'll get to is a common language about how to teach comprehension within a school and across the district. Right now, a student transferring from school to school could be learning how to comprehend totally different, using totally different language, or from grade level to grade level. In a place where I've seen this work best, there's a common program or an approach to teaching that way, which we don't have right now.
But we are embarking on January 30th, we're starting our elementary committees to work on that.
We were commended and really encouraged to continue the work around cultural proficiencies and how it relates, the staff cultural proficiencies and students, and how that relates to student achievement. We're going to be coming to you probably with asking for some support in continuing the work that we had done with Pedro Noguera and Dr. Fergus from NYU. Also,
Denise, could you tell me what cultural proficiency means?
Just your ability to know who your students are, how they learn, where they come from, what that means to them, what's the impact on how they access the curriculum, what's the impact on how they're connected to the teachers and the curriculum. So
that's cultural competence.
Yes. And if it's not happening, what's the impact of cultural destructiveness on teaching and learning? So we'll have some specific goals in the plan around that. Also urge to continue our RTI process and really we have both a strong RTI process for academics and behavior. Mary Ann's been working really hard with that. In terms of RTI not being just a committee or a school-wide team, while we certainly want that, you want RTI to really just be the culture of your school, so that you're an intervention school. As Dr. Brown said, talk about looking at interventions and teaching as opposed to just recommending services and you know, prescribed kinds of programs. So will be one of the things some of this we're already doing. We've already initiated without the plan being done, and we started it last year. A couple of things that we're doing at BJM in some of the grade levels, and we want to do it school-wide, is the intervention model versus a services model. And by that, Mary Ann, I'll ask you to make a few comments on that. Just instead of a student getting academic intervention services for reading 3 times a week forever, or from September to June and then the next September to June, how do we reallocate, how we assign staff so that some groups of students may need a 4 to 6 week intervention around a strategy as opposed to that kind of prescribed or very diagnostic kind of intervention. So I'm excited about it, and it's happening in some areas with real strength, and people are at different points, but we're moving there. Did you want to make a comment on that?
But the real advantage to that is that when a student, for instance, currently the system is you receive a 1 or a 2 on a state test, and you're receiving academic intervention services for the entire year. So there's not the fluidity that happens when a child is growing and learning in a classroom. And the child may actually have one small area that they have to work on, and it could be a 6-week or an 8-week intervention, and then they're actually on grade level and showing, you know, growth as they should. But they are still, the prescription is that they will have this service for a year.
And could you like speak more specifically to what AIS services look like? What I've seen oftentimes is that looks like a pull-out program for a year, and taking a young person out of the literacy block with the regular classroom teacher for most of the year. What does it look like in your building, and what is it going to look like?
There is some pull-out.
Yeah.
But what it looks like and what it should look like when you're a full service, it should be, the kids shouldn't be pulled out of those literacy blocks or math blocks. It should be integrated and co-teaching. And it should be that kids, you look at the whole grade level or an entire classroom, and then the people who are the classroom teacher and the support staff work fluidly with the group. So it's not that the reading teacher only works with kids who scored a certain level, but that is another teacher in the room, and kids change among groups. Sometimes there is a need for pull-out, but you want to minimize that. Same with special ed. So the goal would be that, and the practice would be that it's looking at all students, looking at student data, what kinds of strategies or approaches do they need, all of the kids, to be successful, and who's going to do what, and answer those 4 questions.
You mentioned a key point there, co-teaching. When we think intervention, as we mature and get better at this, it's not just intervention for young people, it's intervention for us as adults also. As we move towards an instructional coaching model, having multiple adults work together to figure out how to work a classroom as opposed to pulling students out or working in isolation. this instructional coaching model will support that. So it's an intervention for us as adults on how to teach reading better when we're all in the room together. If there are 2 or 3 adults in the room together, how do we manage those 15 to 20 students in a way that they're all getting the support that they need? But that's the conversation in the coming months and years for us as we get better at this work.
One of the ways I phrased that was, we talk about declassifying kids and IEPs and AIS. I think we need to declassify and deconstruct disciplines so that the adults aren't just targeted in one specific discipline, but they're working across disciplines. So there may be a reading teacher who has skills and experience that could help a classroom teacher, in science and social studies. There may be a classroom teacher who has developed reading strategies and interventions that a reading teacher may not have yet, depending on where they're at. So it's really about pooling all that together. The other thing about it is kids don't get, if this approach, kids aren't getting tracked. They're moving more fluidly, and you're paying more attention to the ongoing day-to-day learning, and you're adjusting. So it comes back to that formative assessment and the 4 questions that happen in PLCs, like what do we want students to know or learn, and what are we going to do to make sure that happens, and what happens if they don't learn it, etc. So it's more of a cycle instead of just a prescription that someone needs.
So I hear what everyone's saying here, but I also recognize that on the diagnostic model that we've been using, there's a certain amount of inertia, historical, 20, 30 years, however long that's been going on. There's a whole system designed to support that model. There's forms, there's positions, there's colored sheets, there's all this stuff. And I'm curious how, as a school, as a team, as a, how is it possible that all of that, how is it possible all of that can shift when, when first of all this is taking place in your building, and then you have to translate what you're doing in your building to this building, who still has all the green forms or whatever. Is that office geared towards the adjustment and the flexibility that you guys are talking about? Because if not, so that's just, I know you're still working on it, but
we've done it. We've done it at BJM in some areas, and we have more to do, and I have a few other ideas of how to do it. And I worked really closely with the special ed office and AIS office when we had the special classes in our building. I'm thinking of that. We had kids grades 3 through 5, and with the autism programs, or new entrants who come to us who have never accessed general ed because they come from more restrictive settings. We kind of one by one, group by group, worked with families and worked with our chairperson, it was Sheila, and we eliminated the special classes. And we went from a 50% inclusion model to a 90% inclusion model. But all the while doing it, looking at what are the systems that support that. So it just can look different. A special class teacher with 2 TAs and 12 to 16 kids, take it from that context and use those resources other ways. We did a lot of work with families, so IEPs started to look different. The children with autism are now just about fully included. And so the resources go to where they put the kids where they belong, and then let the resources follow it. And so that's something that we did actually right after redistricting in the first city process. So we have experience with that. I think now with us looking at overrepresentation of African American students and Latino Hispanic students, or over-identification. Is it over-identification? Is it not? We'll be looking at that. One strategy that I'd like to propose, and I haven't said this
to a lot of people yet, so I'm just saying it.
You might as well just say it in public.
You know, the coaching model, the re-looking at schedules, re-looking at the school day. I think I'd like school day to be extended so that the meetings and the business of the school day is after the instructional day, compensated. I think we need to continue to strengthen the RTI model because that's preventing classifications. When I look at an example, we have internally we have like a 2 to 6% referral rate to special ed, and a big part of that has been because of response to intervention. Where our classification goes up, our experience has been with new entrants. So, and we're not alone. Many of the schools are experiencing this. And there's always room for improvement. But really, really establishing the RTI model, as I said, is the school culture, not just is a school-wide team, but the school culture that happens in all of the classrooms. I would like to see us, and this was, we talked about this with the reviewers, not necessarily identify and create IEPs for kids pre-K through 2. I don't mean that there wouldn't be any IEPs because we would have children with hearing impairments or autism or health impairments, but the kids with speech and language needs, are there developmental delays, are there learning areas that might look like a learning disability but you haven't teased it out yet. So and still continue to have the staff working together and have the services there and have the staff there to provide the teaching, but not necessarily based on an IEP model, and more of an AIS or RTI model. One of the things that helps us do is it gives us flexibility, because IEPs, sometimes the way they're written, and I think it goes back to what you said, Seth. There's this form, and this is the way the goals are written, and this is the amount of service that kids get. We almost box ourselves in, and so I'd like to see a shift in that, and I'd also like to see a shift in our own reviews of our IEPs. I think kids get IEPs, and we used to have phase 1 and then phase 2, so that kids will remember Doreen when we were together in the special ed office. You did phase 1, which was the recommendations and the programming ideas and the goals, and phase 2 was that every 4 weeks or every 6 weeks with families, with your teams, you were reviewing the IEP goals. And that went away, and it stayed phase 1. And it's not blame, it's just kind of the way the system went. So I think we need to do that. And I think if we did that better, I think we need to do it at all levels. But if we start pre-K through 2, we can do less fragmented kind of instruction and less prescribed instruction, which gives us more flexibility to I think, be more responsive to who the kids are at that time of teaching and learning. That's a shift. For pre-K, that would be a shift, because it's a very strong related services model and a medical model. I'm not saying take away the speech therapists. It could cost the same amount of money, it could cost more, it could cost less. That's what we would have to evaluate. But I think that's critical that we look at that. The other highlights were just around continuing to look at our classroom and school management plans, and not just behavioral management, but instructional management, so you're never separating them. So what instructionally impacts behavior and what behaviorally impacts teaching and learning. Keep our attendance and tardiness initiative going. Last year we went from a 73% of students being on time to 91% being on time. it still needs work and it still can slip here and there. So, but just really, we did a school-wide RTI around attendance and tardiness. So we'll keep that going and keeping other new initiatives that we are working on. I actually don't even want to say the word initiatives. The other areas that we're working on along that model. Always strengthening and understanding the family and community partnerships. Not just keep doing things the same ways they've traditionally been done, responding to changes, family structures, and just what the world the kids are living in. Looking at materials and resources, keeping that balance of job-embedded staff development, school-based staff development, and district-based staff development. And keeping the extended day program going and strong as it is. So those were the highlights that we'll be incorporating into the plan. There was one more area, just a few lessons learned. So do you have any questions regarding the plan, Eldred?
I want to piggyback on what Seth asked and ask a little less politely. So I remember Connie accompanied Connie and some other folks who we went to see a school in New York City that has, if they still analyze children that way, have almost 100% SES. That would have extremely interested, as Sean pointed out, but different and possibly weakened family structures. And the school had oriented itself in a completely different way. And the results across an array of assessments were astounding. So the question that I want to ask you as a building leader, and you hinted at it, suggesting a different structure. Why are we relying on it? It seems like everything you said just now, Denise, was about shoring up that brick wall and trying to push it back so it looks somewhat straight. At least it has the appearance that it can be load-bearing in the way we need it to be load-bearing. If the system we're using doesn't work for the particular load of students that we keep putting in that school, why don't we just abandon this failed model and do something else for those kids?
I'm ready. That's what we'll be coming to you with in the plan. And are you talking about the School of Promise, the Harlem?
Yeah. Well, we went to see HCZ, the Harlem Children's Zone, one of our elementary schools.
They came and visited our school, and we've had people visit there, and we've been sharing ideas. There are some systems that just need to be done differently, and that's what I've been highlighting. I think I want to also, it's not one thing. I mean, it can be, there are things specific that are within your building, and then there's external pieces related to hiring, transfers, budgets. What's the process? We shouldn't let a school open a second grade section in October. It just shouldn't happen. Things like that are part of our practices. I mean, I understand why sometimes it gets to that point, but I think there'll be both a systemic approach towards improvement and achievement, but also just different ways of doing the business. And these are beginning steps. And some of it we were doing when we got out of city. And one of my recommendations in terms of lessons learned is just for everybody to make sure you keep that focus. There's the volume we're all dealing with is huge, but there's a way to keep your focus in priorities in terms of what we need to work on. I'll have a more clear answer after we also meet with the staff and with the parents and the community members that will be part of developing the plan. I think we'll start to get more specific than what I brought out tonight. So, and that's where we would need your support. board support.
Go ahead, Seth.
So one of the things that having the policy or the structure or systems in place where you have the red form for this is doing that, and the diagnostic model as you talked about is that it gives you cover, right? You can always say as a teacher or leader, I identified this, that meant I filled out this form, I've done what's required for this issue. So it gives you cover. And I hear you asking for the flexibility as a building leader and down the chain of people involved with the students. But I wonder what's your sense of, along with that flexibility grant, the sense of accountability that comes with it, because you're not able to say, hey, I identified this, I referred the student to this, I'm good. Whereas when you make that call, that on the fly, improvised call on a kid and resources and, the accountability that comes with that. I expect that there will, because we'll say Denise.
There'll probably be a higher accountability.
Well, that's what I mean. We'll say, Denise, you said you asked for the flexibility. Mm-hmm. We gave it to you. You're now accountable for that decision, where before you didn't have that. You meaning the person making that decision, whether it's a building leader or a teacher in the classroom, could always say, here's the rule book and I followed it. So,
accountability systems, aside from the state tests and external systems, are shifting already with growth models, with the formative assessments, with the way we're looking at, the accountability lies in that PLC work, in that teaching and learning framework, how we're using our resources. I'd like to keep the templates in the areas that we used when you do the self-assessment. There's not going to be a decision made on the fly, and it'll be based on what our students learning. It'll be the response to those 4 questions. Growth models, the state, and we actually at BJM, we've been looking at individual student growth models and following them. So if I come to this table and ask you for something, I'm going to be able to say who has grown at such and such a rate or not, and why. So I think one of the things that there will be a different, we'll do what we have to do, but there will also be additional accountability systems put in that probably will be equally, if not more, effective. And one of the things that, to comment on that is, I'd like, you've heard Dr. Brown talk about student engagement. If we could just even start with that in all of our schools, along with the instructional strategies. But he's worded it as compliance versus engagement, so that kind of that either or, which has its place. But I'd like to shift that to, instead of compliance versus engagement, to accountability and engagement. So that's just a shift in language and thinking. But we're living in a very compliant world, both from the federal and state level. But I think, internal student accountability, internal staff accountability, and have that, accountability as opposed to the thinking around just compliance. So, and we will need help and guidance with how to establish those systems, and part of it will be answers to your questions. Help us do that. So just a few more points was keeping the focus. So as we develop this new plan, systemically, we need to stay on the plan and help us stay on the plan, and be cautious about the amount of external kinds of initiatives. They'll have their place, but just help with prioritizing. I talked about staff development. Some of the things that, there were some resources that we would like to continue. Nonfiction libraries, technology is coming along nicely, the comprehension materials. Letting us look from more leading with what the core curriculum is, the Common Core standards, and the practices that support that, and what the learning outcomes are, and not being such a kind of a program-based approach, like this math program or this reading program or this, just those programs can support it, but they should be based on what the Common Core standards are. I think that's it. I had the pleasure also of comparing this report to the last review, which is, I haven't done it in depth yet, but I just started doing that, and we'll do that as a staff. And it was interesting because the initial report was, when the school was starting to grow and more kids and more teachers and more people, and a lot of the focus was on the alignment of curriculum and continuity and getting your systems in place and creating your community and what's your mission, vision, and values. And that was a focus that was in place and moving forward. And I see this report saying continue with those things, and now here's some new work for you around teaching and learning. And so it's a lot. I don't know if every school's going to do this.
Judy, go ahead.
2 points. I'd like to piggyback on Eldred's. The plan is focused on getting you off cine status. And I understand that. But I don't hear about the other kids, the ones that are doing fine. I'd like to hear why they're doing. So I'd like to hear some successes instead of the negative part. And I was fine with you till you said having the option of, let's say, not using a math program or a reading program or whatever, and yet the initial report, you said that they said, set your curriculum, make it linear, do whatever, and now I get very concerned that
I can clarify that.
Okay.
I think instead of leading with just maybe what a program does, this is nothing against reading programs or math programs or science materials or whatever. It's just, I think we need to really know that piece of what do you want the children to learn, what do you want the children to know, and then what is it that supports that. So is it this kind of, is it a specific program? It might be. Is it an approach towards, is it looking at a student learning outcome and there's other resources that supplement it? I'm not saying everybody go off and do their own thing and not have.
But then I think it leads into assess accountability. And I had a teacher say this to me one time, a resource room teacher. I'm so used to where the kids that I work with, the level that they're working on, that I'm not aware, I'm losing awareness of where the other children that grade level in other schools are. And so, when you have the accountability test between grade levels throughout the district, I think you're going to be tested at the 5th grade level. You're not going to be tested because the child's at the 2nd grade level. And I think it's very hard for kids to have that happen to them. And I'd like to work on the deficit and not, classifying. Yeah, they have huge deficits. What are we doing?
I think the piece that answers that is when you're really an intervention school and you're really strengthening the RTI, and you're looking at every kid in the classroom and how all the teachers are supporting that. You're not looking just at kids with 1s and 2s and what do we do? We're looking at kids who are high 3s and how do we get them to a 4? Or we're looking at a district assessment, or we're looking at formative assessment. So I think the strength of what we're talking about is that it's set up to do that.
Okay.
That's exactly what it should do.
Should do.
And yes,
yeah,
that's what
from
that's
my
what
viewpoint, that's what I wanted to.
Right. And that's what the goal is of what it needs.
We need excellence, and we need, you know, every child at the level that they can achieve at.
That's what that approach towards teaching and learning.
A few more questions.
Very specific question, Denise. You said this several times, that your school is unique in that you get so many transfer students with who are already classified. Do you have the necessary man or woman power now to deal with that, in your opinion? Consistently, I bet you could do a 5-year average, and it would be a lot higher than any other school in our district has to deal with. And my assumption, listening to you, is that we've never resourced that school specifically in line with the facts we know are going to happen every new school year. And then we know how to ask the question. That just seems idiotic. From our perspective, from the superintendent's perspective, from your perspective as a building leader, it's like we know the wave is coming, and we leave you without buckets every year. How will you be coming to us saying, this is idiotic? We need to get in front of this. We need to be prepared for this.
Yes. Yeah, we have. We need to plan in advance for, there's trends that we need to be learning from. And I also understand that, some of it is we need to wait and see what the numbers are or what the budget can support. But when we have known trends, we should provide for that. And it's not like we're doing it based on, this might happen or that might happen. We treat new entrants like a subgroup, another subgroup in our building. When a new entrant comes, we put in the RTI process instead of waiting. So, yeah, I think we can do better planning.
And to me, is a very scary realization that it's automatic like that. And I'm not saying it isn't total, because I've heard, new entrants from West Village spiked.
Yes.
And new entrants from Overlook spiked. And so
I think it's an overall trend. It's just we've been experiencing it for years. We probably have the highest transit right now.
Anything else for Denise and the group?
Or Marianne and Lynn.
Well, can I try to wrap this up? Please
do.
Because tonight was the purpose was twofold. One was to share with you what we hope these learning conversations are going to look like when we go out in the school, and secondly, to update you on the sending process. Let's not confuse the two. The producing a plan isn't the primary focus of our conversations, especially a plan like that. While I've been sequestered to a bedroom in a bed for the last month, I've had an opportunity to read a lot. And I read the autobiography of Steve Jobs. And he speaks to excellent organizations and innovation. And he says that the mark of an excellent organization is when you recognize, you must recognize when you're behind and then leapfrog. I think we recognize when it comes to the art and science of teaching and learning that we're in some ways behind. I think every school district should say that they're behind when it comes to teaching and learning right now. What are we going to do to leapfrog? We can talk about plans and those things now. We can talk about the science as far as accountability measures, APPR. We can do those things. We can talk about the art as far as curriculum maps and lesson plans. But the conversations we're going to be having are going to be different. We're going to talk about art and science, yes. But art, we're going to be talking about true engagement now. The art, we're going to be talking about cross-cultural competencies. The science, we're going to be talking about different accountability measures as far as how do you assess critical thinking in a classroom. The science, what structures must be in place to break down barriers and silos when it comes to educators and young people. How do we get to a place where we don't pull out anymore? And the 3 adults that are in every classroom understand what each other is doing, and we're differentiating to meet every child's needs. That's the kind of science that we're talking about, not cine plans and balanced scorecards and data so much. So I'm almost apologetic that we got into that some tonight, but you needed to hear that if you're going to be approving a plan in the coming weeks. But as an organization that's going after excellence and truly innovative, I want you to know that we're looking to leapfrog. So Ms. Harris, I appreciate your question, because if I had my way, we would knock down some walls. We are going to be knocking down some walls. But you must know that that's going to be challenging the status quo. It's going to be challenging contracts that are in place. We have a collaborative relationship, and we're already talking about how that's going to shift the way we do contracts. Here, I heard the word extending the school day with compensation. You added that in there for Susan. But those are the kind of conversations we're going to have. Now, we talk about not classifying students until 2nd grade. There are people that stay there right now who are going to say, we can't do that. But there's some gray in there that we probably can. So there's some things that we're going to be hoping to do that are going to be leapfrogging in ways to knock down some walls. Because you're right, there's some schools and school districts that are doing this work very well for all children, period. Whether you're poor or whether you're very wealthy. And we can be doing that too. If we think,
just don't use your foot to knock anything down.
Oh man, this foot is going to be out here for a while. But I just want you to know that we're thinking like that, and it's not just at this basic level and a compliant level. We're thinking about truly innovative and knocking down the walls over time.
And Dr. Brown, you certainly know that, and everyone should know that this board certainly is ready and willing to leapfrog. But we have that institution that is the New York State Education Department that basically tries to keep districts from leapfrogging. And so there's all those issues that Denise has been talking about, that the rules and regs have to be followed, and all the things that we want to do at BJM. The staff at BJM still has to produce a product, produce a plan, and we have to present. And so there's a plan, but then there's the real plan. So is that the game we play?
I read this autobiography. I think of that as Microsoft. Yeah, we can play that game too, but we're going to be true to what we know is right and what's good for young people, or the consumer, as Steve Jobs called it. And we're going to do that work at the same time. But in the end, I think what we're going to do and what we're doing is going to prevail. We'll be compliant. We'll check the box and all. Okay.
Or lead. Demonstrate a wish for the state. This district has a history, 200-year history of being an educational leader across the state and finding folks following what this district is doing. And my work when teaching about hip hop is don't talk about what currently exists. I only know what to build what I want to have happen. And so I think we're at a point in time where we're going to build the school district. We want that to happen. The state can come follow us. We'll check the boxes. We'll get the money, right? But we can also lead and be a model in different ways, as long as it's thoroughly rationed and we have good folks on the ground doing great work. So thank you for your presentation.
And certainly working with the families, working with the community, and realizing that that 6-week program may indeed be the best solution for my child, not a year-long program. And I'm not losing anything by not having a year-long program. I'm actually gaining. And so that's, is that what we're talking about, Dr. Brown? I was listening, okay. So Denise and your colleagues, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll just move to wrap up, but we certainly heard much from the policy committee today, which we appreciate. Anything else from any of the other committees that we need to inform the group?
Finance and Facilities will be meeting on the 19th at 5 o'clock.
What was that again?
Finance and Facilities will be meeting on the 19th at 5 o'clock.
Dealing with the issues of the day as we get into our budget season and trying to wrap up more construction projects.
Exactly.
Jay, go ahead.
I went to the BOCES meeting. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Ellen O'Donnell is retiring.
For sure.
I did not know that.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, didn't see that. Anyone else at this time?
Did you want to give a date for the curriculum committee, February at noon, number 6? Is there a number?
Good catch.
It's in the first week.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's all 29 days. I guess it's a leap year, right?
It's in the same week as everything else.
I know we have other meetings coming up, so if somebody gets the date, I just wanted to know.
When is the legislative committee?
It came in the year before.
To Judy's question, the annual legislative breakfast for essentially for the school board.
I'm willing to go on the 4th. Pat says
Brett says it's great.
The legislative breakfast.
Seward's the only one there.
Doreen, you need to confirm that Sean's thinking. And Robbie, what's the date he's going to go? The 4th.
It's just great entertainment for me, man. It's just fun to sit back and watch.
I typically go. It is in Cincinnati, which is somewhere in central New York.
Have a good map for GPS.
So Doreen, you have a few names, I guess. Just let folks know.
Is Jay going?
No, Seward's the only one there.
I know.
So I'm not
So
there.
we're not quite done yet.
You're not quite done yet?
We're not quite done yet.
Oh,
We good?
I believe you.
I think so.
We're at Reprise, and Susan, would you like to give us
Just
a few
briefly,
words?
just a few words. I'll wait for a moment.
We good?
What about it?
Yeah.
Is he definitely going to be there?
There are 2 items. One is, first of all, I want to thank you for all your time and effort. I was listening to a number of people and reading a number of articles. They talked about success and validation. If you validate the effort, success is even greater. And I realize how often we spend a lot of time correcting and building, but not validating the effort that we're making. I want to validate what a lot of teachers are doing. They are really taking all of this very, very seriously. Many of them are telling you how overwhelmed they are or how much time. We have so many initiatives that you just have trouble getting your hands on any of them and getting through. And we are recommending that they pick 1 or 2, stick with it, do it well, and then meet with colleagues so that each building can grow. So I just want to validate the kind of time and effort. We had 6 people who came and gave up their Friday afternoon and all of their Saturday to work on APPR language so that we can get a document that will be functional, not just meet the needs. That's one of the issues we have is state recommendations, and Mr. King, the commissioner, there are just a lot of requirements and statements from the regents and from the commissioner that are fine philosophically, but in practicality become impossible. And our awareness of the economic advantages and disadvantages of children do play into our ability of instruction and engagement. When you have hungry children and tired children or kids with earaches, their engagement, their ability to join in and to want to learn is greatly diminished through no real fault of their own. And we have teachers who are really working on all the ways you can approach the whole child, not just the academic learning, to get them engaged and to want to grow and be successful. But we have real issues when you have a student and you don't know what the answer is and you're seeking it in RTI and you're short of people or time or place, and we're working on it. And I don't think it's all money. I mean, we've talked about it. I really don't think it's just about money. It's also how we formulate our classes, how we group the kids. What you need in one class is not what you need in another, so I'm really glad to hear that that's happening. The second issue I wanted to address briefly has to do with a letter that I received today, and I believe was shared with you, some concern about maintenance in buildings and some of the struggles that are happening. The letter was delivered earlier today. It was delivered to me. I'm sure you'll get one. And I want you to know, it happened to be BJM, and it had to do with what's happening with custodial services and the bathrooms and the maintenance and so on. And I wanted to thank publicly the principal and others who are responding to teachers who are saying it's unacceptable. That whatever the slip was or whatever the reason was, it is important that our classrooms are clean, that we maintain a standard. I know it's a difficult thing to do, but there was a period of time in there where it wasn't happening, and I understand that Ms. Gomber has sought assistance, and some of the teachers wrote a letter so that you would be aware. Sometimes you're not aware. It's not to complain to you, it's to advise you that it is important. The bathrooms need to be clean. You need to have the toilet paper and hand towels there. We need to have the walk shoveled. You need the windows clean enough to see out of. It's a struggle. It's, you know, the world is dirty. And we're working on cleaning it. And I appreciate when administrators step up and say, listen, we've got to do something about it. And I think you need to know. So whenever it is that that letter gets distributed, if you'll just note the intent. I think it's important. When you're frustrated as an employee, and you're working on behalf of the children, sometimes the tone of delivery is not diplomatic. What I'm trying to say is, I commend those teachers for speaking truth to power, letting you know what they need, and seeing what we can do to help them. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. With not seeing anyone else that wishes to speak at this time, I think we'll go ahead and
move to adjourn.
That's what I was hoping for. Thank you. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
The trumpet is invisible. He's behind the organ, above the orchestra. And then we have flutes on the balcony, on my right side, upstairs. And we have all the strings on stage. The very, very slow string chorale kind of melody. The trumpeter always asks the question, and then the flutes reply. And the trumpet is in different meter, but still more or less connected to the strings, whereas the flutes have different tempi, and each of the replies of the flutes are faster. I'm seeing myself as a coordinator of this. I try to be very discreet with my cues to the trumpet and the flutes.
Susanna Malky conducts the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in The Unanswered Question by Charles Ives. The trumpet soloist is CSO Principal Christopher Martin. The Unanswered Question by American composer Charles Ives. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra was conducted by Susanna Malki. Today we feature the U.S. premiere of a concerto for bass clarinet and orchestra by Scottish-American composer Thea Musgrave. The concerto is based on poems by Austrian poet Georg Trakl. CSO bass clarinet soloist J. Laurie Bloom and composer Thea Musgrave say the concerto tells a story.
Thea Musgrave is known for her many operas, so she thinks in storylines and creates color through drama. In the beginning of Wandering Through a Forest at Night, there's swirling leaves. You hear the bass clarinetist wandering around very low.
I had written a lot for clarinet, but not for bass clarinet, and I was haunted by the wonderful virtuosity of that instrument, but also the very different quality it has from the clarinet in that low register, so haunting. So I thought that of making it a kind of a dream with quotes from poems of Trakl, and there were also quotes from the Moonlight Sonata of Beethoven. One of the poems of Trakl talks about the shadows of old men. And so this time I made a shadow in the sense that there's a second bass clarinet off stage who is echoing what the soloist is doing.
It's very melodic music. The accompaniment is very interesting, filled with colors, lots of interesting brass writing. I think it's a fascinating piece.
Bloom is the soloist in Autumn Sonata by Scottish-American composer Thea Musgrave. Susanna Malki conducts the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.